All righty, so hello and welcome. Happy Friday Eve, everyone. You are probably familiar with me at this point, but I am the Assistant Director here at the Leadership Institute at CSU. And over the next hour of this last hour of this morning, we really want this webinar to be interactive. We have some polls, we have some questions. So please engage with us by sending your responses through the chat, as well as your questions. If you have any questions that you want to send to me directly for me to read out anonymously, please feel free to do so. And today's webinar will be facilitated by Dr. Rock. And she is the Dr. Susan Rock. And Dr. Rock is the director of the Faculty Center for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning and the professor of English here at Columbus State University. Dr. Rock teaches early world literature, translation studies, and has designed study abroad programs in England and in Italy. Her experiences teaching and learning abroad have shaped her research interests in embodying learning. She is the author of Minding Bodies: How Physical Space, Sensation, and Movement Affect Learning. She enjoys practicing mindfulness in the classroom and bandwidth recovery strategies with students and colleagues. Please help me welcome Dr. Rock in the chat. And with that, I am turning it over to you, Dr. Rock.
Thank you so much, Brianna, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us this morning. I'm super excited to be here and to share what I've learned over the past several years about the importance of our bodies to the way that our minds function. So, that having been said, let me share my screen with you. All right, how's that looking, Brianna? Good.
Good to go.
Great. So I want to start by asking you about your workplace and the functions that are most important for you to support. Because I think in knowledge and service sector work, we think of, our sort of mental functions first. So what functions, I'm going to ask you to answer in a poll, and you can choose one or all of these. Is it important for you to make people feel welcome in your workspace? Is it important for you to be able to encourage collaboration, to have a quiet and ability for your people to focus on individual tasks? Is it important for you to sustain your employees' productivity? So think about those functions. And I'm going to start a poll. And so if you could use the QR code, maybe with your phone, or if you'd like to hop on this link to slido.com. I think Brianna was going to pop that in the chat. And again, you don't have to choose just one of these functions. Maybe all four of them are important in your workspace.
And while we're waiting for some people to get to the site, I am interested in sustaining employee in productivity, but through collaboration. So I have a twofold answer to that one, because I think that making sure that, individuals have that help that is going to sustain their productivity. So that's just my opinion.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're going to be getting to why that does really make sense.
Awesome.
Wow, so that's jumped to the top here: sustaining employee productivity and encouraging collaboration. And the making people feel welcome, of course, can be not just visitors to your office space, but your own workers, your own employees, the people who are there all the time, you and your teammates. How welcome do we feel in our workspaces? This is great. It's a neck and neck race here. So while everybody's sort of finishing up, and I find this all really interesting, what I want to call to your attention is that I think when we think about any of these functions, we're in our heads, we're thinking about the ways that all of those are very mental kinds of functions. And yet, what I'm hoping to introduce everybody to today are ways that, in fact, our bodies can go a long way in helping us to accomplish all of these different functions within our workspace. So this is the kind of the secret sauce to being able to accomplish all of these functions effectively. All right, so it looks like we've got a good, healthy balance of all of these functions with sustaining productivity near the top. That's great. That suggests to me that this is why minding the body at work maybe was a good topic for you today. All right, so I'm going to move on. So here's our plan for just the next 40 minutes or so. I'm going to explain to you why your body isn't just a taxi to get your brain around the world, how workspaces can affect our performance, how we can take some actions to make our place an effective space for our bodies and our brains. I'm going to talk about chairs just a little bit, and then some final takeaways for you. And over on the right here, this is the cover of my book, which is mostly focused on learning in higher education, but it does apply to adult learning in any setting. So it's available on Amazon if anyone's interested after this talk. All right, so let's talk about bodies a little bit. Your laptop, as long as it's in a climate controlled space, functions the same way everywhere, right? But humans get cranky, we get anxious, we have sad days. We're an animal species, and that means we're maybe not as reliable as computers, but we do have certain animal intelligences that computers don't have. Our brains are hugely energy intensive. So if we were like batteries, we would go into low power mode really quickly. And so I'm sure you've experienced some of this in terms of sleep deprivation. We are super cognitively compromised when we haven't gotten enough sleep. Last week when we had daylight savings, that I think was affecting most people. I know there have been statistics that the day after daylight savings, the rate of car accidents spikes. There's more people in the emergency room. It's a real effect on us. So sleep affects us. Hunger can really affect us and our ability to think well. There's been some super interesting studies about how judges make different kinds of decisions, whether it's before or after lunch. So these are really important to how our brains function, bodily energy. So because we're so interested in conserving energy for our brains, we use tools really effectively, and that helps us to conserve energy. So I want you to think for a minute about when you've got a fork in your hand, and if you are trying to gauge the texture of the food on your plate. It's kind of a crazy thing. You're not touching the food with your finger, and yet somehow that fork allows you to kind of figure out what's going on your plate. It's the same effect for if you use a racket in a tennis match or a baseball bat to feel the impact of the ball. Or even when you're in your car, if you can think about the way that you sense the roof of your car when you're going under a low like parking garage. Or maybe the traction that your tires are getting on the road during a rainstorm. Those are all functions of what scientists call our peripersonal space. We have like an expandable external space for our sensory organs to be able to expand to the environment around us. And not only do we use tools, especially within our peripersonal space, really effectively, but other people, we make use of other people as tools. So some animals are born knowing everything that they'll ever need to know, but humans count on being in social groups that allow us to survive and thrive without having to have all the knowledge and skills by ourselves. So neurodiversity is actually our evolutionary edge. So the boundaries of our bodies are more permeable than we typically think. We're affected by our environment, we're affected by those around us. Holding somebody's hand in a scary moment can actually help to, calm down your heartbeat. We're so dependent on our social connections for survival that our physical health can really suffer when we're rejected or when we experience loneliness. We benefit from having the collective intelligence of our fellow humans, and we evolve to thrive from social connection. So the bioethicist Melanie Challenger has written this really interesting book about how to be animal. That's the name of the title. And she says that we're a hierarchical social species. And so that makes us intensely conscious of our status. And we find it almost impossible not to rate and rank each other. So, this is what sports competition is all about. If you think about it, like humans love these things because we're wired to be constantly perceiving our status vis-a-vis others in any way that we can kind of establish who's up, who's down. It's kind of all very difficult for us to let go of that evolutionary kind of perception of others. So let's move on to think about how all of this affects our workplaces. There's 3 important areas that affect your cognitive focus at work. And I'm going to move this Zoom bar over so it's not in everybody's way. There we go. The first is that people need to experience a sense of belonging at work. And that ties back into what I just mentioned about how susceptible we are to always gauging our status vis-a-vis other people and needing to feel safe. If we're constantly like monitoring the environment because there might be a threat to our psychological safety, that eats up a lot of cognitive bandwidth. And so we're not thinking as well when we don't feel that we're accepted and that we belong in a space. Secondly, in your workspace, you need to think about the ways that people have places and opportunities to kind of offload their ideas in progress. And we do a much better job. This gets back to collaboration, Brianna, when we have other people, again, like we extend our cognitive capacities to other people. So as much as we can support that kind of collaborative work through our space, that's an asset. And then thirdly, and this came back to everybody's top choice in the poll, we need to sustain people's energy, their mood, their ability to focus. So let's look at these one at a time. A sense of belonging can be created by the kinds of objects that are on display in a workplace. So I want to open this up to chat for just a second, and I want everyone to look around your workspace, and I'm kind of purposely showing you mine in the background here. Tell me in the chat, what is on display around you right now? So let's have some sense of what is around you.
This is a great question, Susan. I definitely want to point out my little Miss Sunshine in the back of me. I also have on my bookshelf some some seashells, and behind those seashells is a notebook with the state of Florida on it. So to represent me and where I come from. So those are two key markers. Ben says family pictures, Katrina, lamps. Ooh, I like that one. Plants as well, papers, pictures, wall art that my children have completed, family pictures again. And I also want to point out, Susan, I think that this is a great point that you're making. On our bookshelf in our main lobby area, there's, you know, little pieces of each of the staff members here. So when people come in and they see those things, not only is it creating a sense of belonging, they're seeing reflected in our space their identity. So I think that this was a great point. And thank you all for all of the feedback in the comments.
Yeah, yeah. So I confess to being a bit of a, not that you can tell this from what's behind me, but a minimalist, at least at home. And I like to feel that I'm not attached to physical objects, but I read this really great explanation for why we do get so attached to the objects in our homes, especially, or the things in our workplace. And it's because they give us a sense of coherence and continuity. You know, you go, oh, there's my family. Oh, there's this wonderful vacation that I went on. And it's a way to sort of feel secure by reflecting back to you who you are. And so in a workplace, ideally, there's also some sense of shared identity, right? It's not just about all of us and our individual loved ones, but do you have kind of the big wipe off calendar where everybody can sort of see what we're all doing together? Are there on display maybe pictures of shared places that are of importance to everybody in your office, or people working together, or the shared history of your organization? And those are important to do in a really careful way so that people see themselves reflected. So I know, the portraits of leaders of your organization is a traditional thing to have in workplaces, but you need to carefully think about how that might encourage or discourage the people in your workplace now from feeling that they can see themselves as a future leader in your company, and so we need to be really representative of our people who we have in our offices right now, and model that we see everybody contributing to the leadership of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Rock, that was a great point. Yet again, I didn't think about it from that perspective when you talked about displaying objects. There can be some things that are displayed that, makes a person feel minimized when they enter your space. And that can impact the engagement, impact the collaboration when you're trying to meet with community partners or other organizations that you need to partner with. So I think that's great. And what was coming to mind to me was a black and white office, no color around, like, throw some orange on the walls, throw some yellow on the walls. And I think that was a visualization that helped me for sure. That was great.
Well, it's great, when you're away from home for several days or even longer, and you come back and you can kind of see your place in a fresh way. If it's possible to do a little audit of your office space that way, after you've been out of it for a while, it can be really helpful. Like, try to be really clear-sighted about what does this communicate to a person who's stepping into it for the first time. All right, great. So moving on, we talked about the way that brains need to be efficiently using tools. And I know that unintentionally, sometimes we store all of our ideas in private places. We've got our computers, our notes, and it's more helpful, especially when we're generating ideas and refining ideas, if we can share our thinking in a sort of publicly visible space. So the people in these photos have the fancy glass walls, but whiteboards are such a great way to generate ideas, even in a meeting. To have somebody taking notes on a whiteboard instead of on a piece of paper can be very helpful, because it allows you to sort of follow the shared ideas in progress in a way that makes it a little bit clearer. Maybe if there's some conceptions that develop, or somebody's following the conversation in a way that's differently than the person who's taking notes. And so having that note taking in view of everybody can be super helpful. The other thing I want to point out about, for example, the way people are using sticky notes in these pictures, is that we are also wired to be able to navigate spaces physically, and that helps us to like remember and to process the ideas better. So if there's ways for you to use maybe those giant post-it notes, or the sorts of portable whiteboards that could be rolled around a room, that is super helpful for being able to, put ideas in order, or rethink how the process is going to work. And it's really important to establish a norm that everybody gets to participate in this. There's not just one note taker or one person who's in charge of, being allowed to write on the whiteboard. It has to become a norm that anybody can grab a marker at any point and contribute to the idea generating. And that's a way that we take advantage of our, evolutionary capacity of neurodiversity, of having everybody's brains contributing to the, the task at hand, and being able to physically navigate in public the way that those ideas are developing is more important than you would think. You can try it and see how it changes your meetings. All right, so finally, we know that even the mental work that many of us do in, knowledge industries and service industries can be really draining. And maybe that's also why everybody said sustaining employee productivity is so important. So what I want you to do right now, I want to invite everybody to stand up and have a little stretch. We don't often, and I want you to know I'm standing during this presentation, just because it is really important for us to be able to like move away from our screens and move away from our chairs. If you have a window nearby, I invite everybody to look out the window. See if you can focus on clouds or trees or anything that is like as far away as you possibly can. It's really important for us to be able to sustain our energy by being outside if possible. And if not, then doing what this slide is showing, bring the outside in. And so that's why somebody mentioned earlier they have plants in their office. That's fantastic. Plants, if possible, fresh air if your window's open. I know during pollen season that's not great for everyone, but outside of pollen season, fresh air can be really restoring and rejuvenating. Having, sort of an office with earth tones and ways that people can feel restored just by the biophilic, or the, nature related features of your office is really important to sustaining people's well-being and their energy.
And Dr. Rock, before we move on,
Yeah.
I have a question that I want to ask.
Mhm.
Would you consider, just getting up from your desk and walking down the hall for a few seconds and coming back? Do you think that that would fill the movement space, or do you need to do something a little bit more in order to get back centered and get back focused?
Well, I'm going to share some research work with you on that very question in just a minute. So
Awesome. Thank
you are
you.
right, following my logic right
Okay.
into some good stuff that's just hot off of the out of the science lab. But I will say one thing about standing or leaving your workspace just for a few minutes, that's also a norm that the office needs to kind of establish as being okay, walking around the hallways. I know I have tried to establish in my office that we want everyone to go outside. So when I hear the exterior door slamming, it makes me really happy. Like, oh, good, somebody's going out to get some fresh air. And so, these are all about sort of setting new norms for your office. All right. So, I found this really amazing book from 1973 by an organizational psychologist named Fred I. Steele. And his book was called Physical Settings and Organization Development. And he had this uh, idea that there's environmental competence, and that he defined that as an individual's ability to be aware of the surrounding environment and its impact on them. And secondly, to have an ability to use or change the settings around them to help achieve their goals without inappropriately destroying the setting or reducing the effectiveness of others. So he called attention to there being certain fixed features that you have to, everyone has to be aware of. That would be things, walls in your space that can't be changed without some renovation. Then there's unfixed features like chairs, and especially, some chairs that are meant to be very easy to move around. But then he identified this other super interesting category that he called pseudo fixed features. And those are things in your space that could be moved around, adjusted, changed to make everybody more comfortable. And yet they often aren't, because people don't have a norm set of rearranging anything. So he noted that, for example, and I think this is true in many of our workspaces, people entering a meeting room very rarely rearrange the furniture. They won't open the blinds or adjust the lighting, or sometimes even move things out of the way that are blocking their line of sight. Um, the author of this book shared an anecdote from working with the Ford Foundation offices, in which the designers had put curtains on the interior windows of people's offices, and it was supposed to be an unfixed feature, right? You could close the curtains when you needed some focus time or open them. And then it became an office norm to never close the curtains because it was perceived as like hiding. And so what Fred I. Steele points out is that Ford Foundation office was sort of degrading people's focus time because it became the norm to never be able to give yourself the privacy of closing the curtains. So this is another interesting moment for the chat. I want you to think about this. Share in the chat any sort of norm of office behavior that you can think of that like could be different, but it's just not what everybody's typically used to doing. So this could be taking a break to go outside. It could be norms surrounding the public spaces in your office. Like, what are the norms of your shared spaces? What are the norms of your conference rooms? What do people feel comfortable doing or not doing in the shared spaces of your workspace? I'll
That's a
give you,
good reflective
yeah,
question,
I'll give you a
Dr.
minute to think
Rock.
about that.
Yeah, yeah, but the first thing that came to mind, well, the second thing, just water cooler conversations,
Hmm.
hallway conversations. We have definitely normalized that in our space. If two of my colleagues are having a conversation and I hear something that interests me, jump right on in and give my feedback and input. So that's something that we have definitely normalized is just hopping in on the conversation. Nothing is not meant for you to hear or not meant for you to add in input. And when we do add, if I do jump into the conversation, I am made felt that my opinion was valuable and that I added something to the conversation. So I would just say hallway conversations
Mhm.
about work, about life,
Mhm.
about spouses, about children. That's something that we've definitely normalized within our space.
Isn't that so interesting? And they take place in the hallway. That's great.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, I'm not seeing too many contributions to that question. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. But I want you to think about that. Hold that in your heads and think about what the norms of your office spaces are and whether maybe they're around these pseudo fixed features. Could some things be changed that would make your spaces more conducive to collaboration, to sustaining your energy? All right, so let me zoom in here on this photo. I want to tell you a little bit about some options for shared spaces, just to sort of get your wheels going for things that you might have available in some shared spaces at your workplace. This is a diagram from the designer Kamara Sudbury, and she works at, or she's a consultant for Steelcase. And she explains why one size never fits all. People like to have options, and you're always sort of needing to balance some tensions. There's not one perfect space that's going to be great for everyone because we need to be doing different things at different times. And also, we come to our workplace with different kinds of needs, personal needs from time, one week to the next. So you have to balance flexibility with predictability, to balance connecting with others, with protecting your time and space. So if you look over on the number one area at the top of the diagram, you can see there's high-backed chairs that kind of screen out visual distractions and give people a little bit of protection. There's high top table and stools that give people options to stand or to perch. Perching is always sort of a nice option in between standing and sitting. The number two um, area of the diagram shows the fixed feature of the wall that provides kind of predictability for this space and the ways that that bank of um, couches or up against, there's booths or up against that wall. In the number three area, you can see there's round tables that often provide good sight lines throughout the room. And those stackable kinds of chairs offer lots of flexibility for quick reconfiguration and for accessibility. It's funny to me sometimes to notice how even the most lightweight stackable chairs don't get moved around often enough. Like that's what they're built for, that you can move them around. In the number four area of the diagram, you can see there's actually a cushion on the floor there and some low stools, which helps people when they need to feel a little more grounded. And so it's a more informal but kind of interesting option to be able to give people who that might really enjoy being able to feel grounded on various occasions. And then the number five area is a raised level of this big open space. And of course, that is more conducive for public presentations. They've got some mobile technology there that offers equity for people who are working remotely versus the people who are in the space. And so, this is kind of a dream setting of an office space, but I wanted just to show it to you. You can see they've got lots of plants, they've got lots of windows. If you have the ability to do any sort of, or if you're coming up on ordering new furniture for your space or doing any sort of renovation, these are the principles that are helpful to keep in mind. Okay, and now we're getting to the chair and the seating. Sedentary work contributes to a ton of health problems. It's back pain, loss of mobility in our knees and our hips, decreased sensation in our feet. It's a contributing factor to diabetes and high blood pressure. Plus, as I was mentioning before, this screen distance that we're used to looking all day long has an impact on our eyesight, and it can exacerbate nearsightedness. So there's apparently been a real spike in diagnoses of nearsightedness in kids these days because they're not playing outside often enough. They don't get enough natural light in their eyes, and they're not looking up into treetops and clouds, and that it affects the muscles in their eyes. So it's a big problem, considering that I think the people who developed the personal computer never imagined that we would be chained to it in the way that we are. All right, so here's the big research that I wanted to share with you. What is the least amount of activity needed to counteract the health impact of a workday filled with sitting? A 5-minute stroll every half an hour, which is a lot. Like, that is a frequent break in your workday. So I want to show you the details on this. This is so interesting. Let me just describe what they did first. This Columbia team had a bunch of people participate in a study: older adults, retirees, homemakers, full-time employees, part-time, from every job you could think of, CEOs, truck drivers. There was an even split between remote, hybrid, and in-person workers. And so during the first week, they had everybody just behave as normal and record their baseline data, going about their day with no changes to their habits. And then they were broken up into cohorts. One group took a break every 30 minutes, the second group took a break every hour, and the third group took a break every 2 hours. And then they reported back to the team how their movement breaks went. So they opened up this study to the listeners of the TED Radio Hour on NPR last fall, and 20,000 more people signed up for it. So we have some really interesting results from this. So here's what I want to show you. They tracked people's blood pressure and their blood sugar, which is very important, and there were important benefits there, but that's not what I mostly want to show you. I want to talk to you about fatigue and mood disturbance and cognitive performance, because that's minding the body. So that first diagram in the upper left, A, are fatigue levels. And so the solid black line was the control. That's like without changing anything about your habits. And you can see it makes sense, right? Throughout the workday, you're getting more and more tired. At the end of the workday, you're the most tired. The dotted line that goes vertically down the middle is lunch. So this is, people come in after breakfast, they have they're working hard. They're really tired after lunch. That's a big jump. And then at the end of the day. So then if you notice the mini dotted green line, these are the people who took a 5-minute break every 30 minutes to take just a short little stroll. They were less tired at the end of the day than the beginning. How crazy is that? So their fatigue was reduced by 25% from moving around every half an hour. That's incredible. So then look at diagram C, which is about mood disturbance. So this is like how sort of, I don't know, irritable maybe you're getting, or just sort of, over it. And the control group, of course, is feeling like they're just done by the end of the day. And again, that mini dotted green line for the moving around every 30 minutes kind of gradually drops. It's like their mood improved throughout the day, which is amazing. And then finally, this chart over on the right-hand side or graph shows cognitive performance. And so that's where, again, the moving every 30 minutes seemed to really make a difference in how well you felt like, your brain was functioning. I think the study participants, it was either a self-report or they completed some sort of short cognitive exercise in order to gauge their cognitive performance. So the researchers found this dose relationship. It meant that the more breaks a person took, the better they felt. But even the groups that only moved every 2 hours reported an improvement. So Keith Diaz, who's the lead researcher, said, across the board, it didn't matter necessarily how often you moved, you still had benefit, but you got the more benefit from the more often you moved.
Susan, this is a great visual. I am thinking to myself, be the mini green dots,
Yeah.
especially, coming back into the office after being off the first part of the week. I want to stay chained to this chair and I, am already telling myself I don't have time to get up every 30 minutes. But to see how the control, especially with C, the mood disturbance. I mean, talk about relating this back to personal life. When you do those things, you are less irritable for your family when you get home. So just looking at it from that perspective, this was a great slide, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now it's time for a second poll, and we're going to do a word cloud here because I mean, the other really important part of that study was they wanted to collect, like, how hard is this for you? What's getting in the way of doing this? So here's our second poll, and I want you to just think of 1 or 2 words that might explain what keeps you from moving more throughout the day. What are the obstacles? In word. Meetings, back-to-back meetings. Mhm. Oh my, yes. Oh, the phone. Time. I'm guessing that has to do with like a sense of urgency. Yeah, deadlines, crisis, workloads. Kind of surprised not to see email popping up here, but I know that's what keeps my butt in my chair for too long. Oh, there we go. There it is. Email. Back-to-back Teams meetings. Right. Yep, computer work. One more thing. Yes, I so relate to that. I'm just going to do one more thing. This is great. Too much to complete. So what I think is so interesting about this is talk about pseudo fixed features. What if meeting norms became more like, what about the walking meeting? What about the meeting where it's okay for some people to be standing during the meeting? What if, the ability to have an adjustable stand sit desk allowed you to take care of one more thing or one more email while you weren't sitting? And, I'm not going to say that I have the perfect answer to address, all of these obstacles, because this is reality. And the Columbia researchers really, this is the next step. Like, we know this is going to be better for us, that so many people do sedentary work. We got to figure out how to make this work. But it's going to take some creativity. It's going to take some breaking of norms. And I know I had a great suggestion from my associate provost, Alicia Bryan, she actually sets a timer on her computer for every 30 minutes so that it dings and reminds her to get up and move around. One thing I hope will be clear to everybody here at this end of the end of this presentation is that you might be better functioning and able to complete all of this crisis and deadlines and the time crunch that you get into if you can take care of your body slightly differently, if we can be more mindful of how our bodily energy helps us to manage all of this stuff. All right, so here's my takeaways. Sedentary work demands that we pay really careful attention to our physical bodies. They are critical to our having effective knowledge and service work. So if you have the ability to spend any time, money, or effort on your workspace so that it's more conducive to positive interaction and productive focus, it's worth every penny. It's important to establish norms that empower people. So empower people to be standing, to be moving, to have a walking meeting, to develop spatial competence with their indoor rooms. So if you walk into the meeting room and the meeting is for 3 people and you're sitting at a table that seats 16, what could happen in that room that might be different, that would affect the interaction more successfully? And finally, move throughout the day. Find ways to make it happen, even if it's not every 30 minutes, as the study showed. Whatever amount of movement you can work in will be helpful. So with that, I'm going to call the workshop to a close, the seminar to a close, and offer anyone the chance to throw out some questions, comments, thoughts.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rock, for this insightful and research-rich based webinar today. Katrina says, thank you, great info. Thank you, Katrina. My biggest takeaways for today, to just sum it up, would be physical space, visual space, and then creating movement space. I know that it's easier said than done. And I know some of you all may be thinking, I don't have the decision to buy furniture, but you can model the way. You can model the way to create these new norms that will empower others. And to go back to what I said earlier, doing these movement things and getting up, being the mini green dots that we saw visually, that will allow us to not only be better for our families after the work hours, but for ourselves. Maybe if I did this, I would be less likely to go home and watch junk TV, but I may read. Doing these small things will really improve your overall performance and your overall well-being. So thank you for this, Dr. Rock. There are some more comments in the chat. Thank you. I'm going to try the 30-minute timer approach and to help with my daily fatigue. You are not alone, Katrina. I will be as well. If you would like a copy of the presentation, as well as a link to the recording, go ahead and drop your email addresses in the chat. Within the next 48 business hours, I will have that information to you all. Our next webinar will be in April. It's April the 18th at 11 a.m. Susan has put it on the screen. It is capacity building with Brian. So I think that is the perfect follow-up to today's conversation. So I'm going to hold you all accountable and hope that you come back next month so we can check in and kind of gauge where you all are as far as doing movement to enhance your capacity. So on behalf of the Leadership Institute staff, I thank you so much for all of your engagement, completing the polls. If you have any topic suggestions or want additional information, please email us at leadershipinstitute@Columbus State University. Leadership Institute at columbusState.edu. Leadership Institute at columbusState.edu. And Susan, I think that means I need to get up for a 5-minute walk.
That's right. That's right. I love it. The fact that we're finishing up here with I've got 8 minutes to noon. Everybody get up and go for a little stroll. It's the perfect sign off.
Yes, awesome. Well, thank you all again and get to moving, and we will all see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.